All right, thank you everybody for joining us today. Myself, Dan Ahern, and Jonathan Smith, as Scott said there, we're going to go over what's new, what we've been working on with the OpenRoads 2024 release software. Got a little bit of interactivity for you today if you'd like. There is a QR code on the screen. It'll be on the next couple slides as well. So you can scan that with your phone and participate in some questions, or you can also go to a web browser and go to slido.com and type in that code down there at the bottom. As I said, that'll be on the next couple screens, so if you missed it there, don't panic. We'll let you take a minute, get into there. Just tell us a little bit about where you're coming from. We got a large audience with us today. We've got, well, it looks like we're over 700 of us with us so far today. Almost 750 so far. So we're coming from a lot of different places. It's hard sometimes when we're together virtually like this, understanding how many people are there and how many places they're coming from. So we thought this might just provide a little bit of fun so you can see where different people are coming from. As I let that run for a little bit more here, like I said, we are going to have 4 questions as we go through this, just to give you a little participation in it. But largely what we're going to be covering today is the meat of the software. What's coming? What have we been working on? What's new in here? Well, it looks like we got Texas pulling ahead with the most entries from there. We got a lot US, USA, some general ones, but we've got some other people joining us too. Where do I see on here from around the world? Montreal is with us today. Most of the states I see in here. I think I saw Denmark in the list there. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us wherever you are. And for those that are joining us later or watching the recording of this, thank you for taking the time to join it from there. Now, before we move into the meat of the presentation, I am going to ask you one more question. So if you would, please tell us, what software are you using the most right now? What version or what software are you using? As you're answering that, I'm going to move on to our next slide here. We do have a disclaimer statement that we do need to read because we're going to be talking about the newest software out there. We're going to be talking about the unreleased OpenRoads 24 software. Because it hasn't been released yet, we legally do have to give you this disclaimer that our release plans and timelines are forward-looking estimates and projections. We can't make assurances that we'll be able to meet such estimates and projections by the date specified. Please don't go make stock purchasing decisions based on this. That said, of course, we're trying to give you the most honest and up-to-date information we can on this. And I know the number one question everybody's going to have is, when is this coming? OpenRoads and OpenRail Designer 2024 will be released in the 4th quarter. So what we're talking about today is coming. It's coming soon. It's just not quite there yet. We're not quite to a point of releasing it, but it is coming soon for you. So with that, let's get into what this is. What have we been working on? What have we been doing with this? Well, here's a quick glance of just where we've been working, some of the major areas of the software that we've been working in, and where we've been. Today, we're going to talk about enhancements largely across these areas, but we've been also doing a lot of work around bugs and stability in here. We do hear that from you. We understand that there are some stability issues with the software. You'd like to see it improved, and we would too. We've handled well over 1,000 bugs in this release so far that we've dealt with and fixed. At least 25% of those are directly related to things that we've heard from you and ourselves, stability-related things. So that is really the core of where our focus is at, in addition to the improvement areas. This also ties directly back to those service cases that you filed, where something wasn't working the way you needed it to, or wasn't working at all. Maybe something was incorrect in there. There's over 170 direct service cases that will be resolved once this release ships. So those are some of the major areas we've been working on. Now, this next release will be built upon MicroStation 24.0.01. That doesn't exist yet either. It has not been released yet. So it'll be coming out soon as well. So you will have all of the capabilities that were released in MicroStation 24.0 as well as 24.0.01. Now, some of those that are already out that came out in the 24.0 software Include things like some improved GIS integration, where now you can use your fences to query and clear features more easily. You can reproject shape files on the fly. There's work that they were doing within the 2D and 3D modeling tools, improving the speed of the text tools for editing and pasting and typing text. There's acceleration within the printing area by providing the capability to use multi-core processing with the printing. There's improvements in the drawing production areas. So if you need to bring in and link to Excel files, those can be done more easily now and much more performant than they were before, especially for those large and complex Excel files that you're trying to link in. There's been a lot of work done, and this was done jointly with the civil team, but a lot of work around sheet indexes, allowing you to have multiple sheet indexes on a project so each group can have a different sheet index, pull those up, and have a master index for the project. So that's just a couple glimpses of some of the capabilities that you'll get that come from the MicroStation or the platform side of things. The rest of today, I want to spend, both John and I, talking about what new capabilities we have within the OpenRoads and OpenRail products. So one of the first ones is around the Analyze Point tool. We've made some enhancements in here with this tool. What you've always had with the tool is the ability when you're analyzing something like geometry, as you browse around, it gives you that dynamic feedback. Well, what we've added now is the ability to place text when you place that. So you can simply turn on that toggle, and when you move around and you click your data point, it'll now place that text into your file. You can also copy that text to the clipboard. So if you need to paste that into a notepad or any other application, you can quickly and easily do that. We heard from many of you that you were spending too much time writing that information down and then going typing it back in somewhere else. So just trying to make that easier. This doesn't only work in plan view geometry, it works anywhere that the Analyze Point tool works. For example, in terrain data here, you have those same place text and copy to clipboard processes. Now the place text is very simple. It uses the active text settings. So there's no setup behind this. You can just go and use it. You can quickly adjust however you want that text to look by changing your active text settings. We've done work within the IFC space of things. So we do support the final and released version of IFC 4x3 if you do need that. That has been supported for several months now once that was ratified by Building Smart and the IFC commissions. But one of the things you may run into with IFC exporting is that different people have different needs. So here, for example, I'm going to export out this IFC file. We'll create this data, and you'll see that when we open up the IFC file that it's not going to look exactly like it's looking in the file here in my DGN file where I'm sending it out from. It's missing some of those structures under there, under these rail paths. And the reason it was missing those is those were construction elements inside the DGN file, the way they were created. And by default, our settings are to not export construction class elements to the IFC file. But you can change that within the schema mapping file. So you could go in and change it. Here we've changed that and said, yeah, I want my construction elements to go to my IFC files. And we can go back and export it again. Well, what we've enhanced is this ability for you to now go easily select those schema mapping files. So you can have your own mapping files, store them wherever you want, select that file that's got your definitions in there, however you tweaked it and modified it, and send that out. And we'll go back to our BIM Vision viewer. We're just showing as an example to view the IFC file, and you can see that that data is there. So providing you more flexibility in how you want to make those adjustments to your IFC exports and be able to send that data out. Now, if you want to learn more about IFC for road projects, please join Alan Esquire on Thursday, where he's going to get into this, and I'm sure a whole lot more detail on how you can create your IFC outputs from OpenRoads. Another one that we've added, kind of a small one, but we hope it'll help you. Right on the help menus within the road and rail products, we have now linked to the Bentley support page as well as the Bentley Ideas portals. So if you need to submit a service request or you have an enhancement idea, you don't have to go figure out where those links are anymore. Go right to here and you can get to them very quickly and easily. We have also added an International Foot workspace to the deliverables. Those of you that are in the US know that the International Foot is coming, and you may need to be transitioning from the US Survey Foot to International Foot. If you're needing to do that, we're providing you now an example workspace setup. You can use that and use some of the files in there to help with your own setups when you're ready to do that. For example, you may want to grab the AASHTO design standards that are already set up for you in there and ready to go in that International Foot unit. We continue to develop and extend our SDK as well. So those of you who are trying to advance the software further, kind of put in those last mile kind of extra utilities that you want to put in there to customize it to do the things you want, the SDK does continue to expand with support for newer versions of Visual Studio, more templates, more documentation, a lot more stuff, particularly around the Rail and the ProjectWise areas. So you'll find more examples and more documentation in there. Now let's move in and talk about where we've done some work around the terrain functionality. The first thing that we've done is we've added a new tool to let you create 3D contours from 2D graphics. So here is an example where we've got a 2D graphic file. This one happens to be a DWG, but it could be any kind of graphic file that has two-dimensional data in it that represent contours. Now you need to create those or convert those to 3D so that we could then create a terrain model out of it. What we can do with this tool is we can specify, are our slopes moving up or downhill? We're going to start with a manual elevation, and we're going to set that to elevation of 20. So our first contour is going to be at elevation 20. They're going to step at a 0.1 foot interval. There's going to be 5 majors or 5 minors per major. And we're going to use these 2 element templates to produce the color of the contours so we can see them easily. We then just strike a line. All of the 2D graphics that we cross, the very first one will be that starting elevation of 20, and every other line will be colored based on our element template and will be positioned in 3D based on that 0.1 foot step. Now we can continue on and change our elevation method to from existing element, and we can find more of these contours. So now we just cross any 3D contour we've already created and start building more. It'll read the elevation off that existing contour and continue to build those additional contours based on our steps. The final result are 3D lines that represent those contours, which you can then easily pull in and create a terrain model out of. Another addition that we've created within the terrain space is the ability to create terrain models directly from HEC-RAS SDF files. So if you do have an SDF file, you can browse out, select that file, and import it directly in to build a terrain model. So here we've selected the file. We can choose which profile to read out of the file. This one only happens to have one profile in it, so we'll choose that one. What feature definition do we want to use for our new terrain model? It'll bring it in and build that terrain model for you. Now, moving on to the next area. Geometry is a huge focus of ours, and it has been for the last year, and we've made a lot of great progress that we want to show you on some of the geometry tools that we've been working on here. The first one is really just about ease of use. So here I've got a fairly simple alignment. It's got 3 curve sets in it and the tangents around it. And in the properties dialog, you see how that is displayed. Now this is all accurate, but it's a little bit confusing to kind of understand. Are these the geometry elements that I'm supposed to be picking in here? Or is it this bit down here that I'm supposed to be picking? And if I look at it even deeper, if I look at like this fillet that's in here, I understand that's a fillet, but all I see in here is depends on and lines and intervals. I don't see the arc. What the heck are you talking about? So what we've done, even though this is all correct and it really truly does describe how the geometry is built, that's not what you want to work with. That's just too hard. It's not what you want as a user. So we've rethought this and said, wait a minute. We need to simplify this and put forward the data you want, not the logic on how the geometry is actually constructed. When I see a fillet and it's only got an arc in it, that's what I want to see. Or I want to see a line. Or I want to see a fillet that shows me that this particular one's made up of a clothoid spiral or an arc and another spiral. So much more simplified presentation of that. Exactly the same geometry, nothing else you need to do different. We're just presenting it in a simplified fashion. Another area that we've done a lot of work on is around the complex redefine tool. So if you used complex redefine in 2023, you may run into frustrations like this where you go to pick an element and it says, hey, there's something wrong. I can't make this connection. Go play with your tangents and your trims and figure out why I can't make this connection. That's, again, not what you want out of this. You just want it to work. So we've really gone back and we've completely redone the engine underneath complex redefine. So now we're going to go sort out those intervals and those tangency issues and those trim issues and resolve it for you and just let you pick that geometry and do our best to just say, here's the result that you were looking for, without you having to go back and forth and try to figure that out and dig into where those adjustments might have been needed. Another thing that we've done in here is we've implemented a new tool called Geometry Alignment Replacer. Now, it's new to most of you, most likely, because it's new on the menu. There has actually been a key in for this around. Some may have known for a while. There was kind of an incomplete tool in the background that did some of this. But this tool now exists on the menu so that you can go in and process. What this allows me to do is take things I have. Here I've got a piece of geometry. It's got a corridor on it. It's got a couple of related dependencies, some offset geometries. And I can just say anything that was listening to that piece of geometry, now go listen to this one down at the bottom. And it's going to move all of those over. Now, hopefully your jobs aren't moving as drastically as my little demo there. But when you do need to shift things from one piece of geometry to another, you want it to listen to that other, you can do that now with this tool. We've done a lot of work in the area of points. So one of the challenges that we had with points, or frustrations that you would have run into, is that points weren't always synchronized between their 2D and their 3D representation. There were situations where you could kind of get them out of sync. You could get different properties on them. You could get different situations happening there. So we've done a lot of work with points to make sure that they're always synchronized between the two, whether that's the naming or the properties behind them, the editing of them. If you move it in one, it's going to move into the other. We've improved the way you can edit it. So if you look at that stop sign in the right corner there, notice that kind of big ball at the bottom, that drag edit that you can get to much more easily to move it around. The much more logical rotation circle that's there and a lot more feedback for you on that. We've also done work around snapping with the points so that as you approach a point and you're wanting to snap to the origin, it's going to be much more likely to get to the origin all the time. And if you want to snap to some other object, some other piece of graphic within the point, you can still do that, but it's less likely to be connecting to those automatically and getting you to the proper origin. So all the way around, it should really improve just using points here and make them easier to use. Now, to take that a little bit further, we have done a little bit of work around the icons that we show you when you're using snaps as they relate to persistency in the civil world or to the geometry rules that exist. So before, we always showed you whatever the snap was going to be. In this case, we show a key point snap icon here. But in this case, the snap's not persistent. Well, as I'm running the software, unless I have that feature definition toggle bar up and I'm really paying attention to am I persisting or not persisting right now, it was not obvious to you because we had the same icon. What we've done now is when your persist is enabled and you are remembering or persisting that snap, whatever icon you have also has a little ruler in it. So here we're showing the key point snap with the little ruler, but that's going to be true with other snap types as well. They'll get that little ruler in there in addition to the snap icon. So let's just take a look at this as an example. We'll do an offset geometry here. We'll turn persist off first, snap to the end of this tangent here. We see our snap icon in there, the key point snap in this case. It will snap to there, but it is not being persisted. Now let's go and turn persist on. We'll go and place another one on the right-hand side of this geometry, and notice that we get immediate feedback, and just by looking on the screen, I know that I'm persisting that. You also get the same feedback when you come back and select this later. So if you go back and select it, it's going to show you that that was persisted with that snap icon. Here's just another one. Will not persist here on the top. I will go and persist it down here so you can see that different icon popping up. Well, hopefully that'll make it much more obvious to you when you have your persist on and off as you're browsing around and working in your files. Something else that we've added within the geometry space is the ability to work with your profiles either oriented left to right or right to left. So here's a typical profile view. 0 on the left, or my low stationing on the left, my high chainage or stationing over here on the right. It's increasing from left to right, the way it's always been. And if you use any tools, place lines, place arcs, civil analysis, or analyze point in here, it's going to flow with you in that orientation. At any time, you can take and present a profile the other way around by going to your view attributes and toggling on right to left. It's going to swap all that around, swap any annotations that you had on there around. Notice that it moved the elevation grid from the left to the right, so you do get some feedback there. And you can also see the chainage or stationing across the bottom moving from 0 on the right to higher chainage on the left. And any tools that you use would follow that as well. Now, this is not stored with the profile. You can toggle it back and forth anytime you want. So you can, if it's convenient for you right now to work right to left, and then you want to work left to right, just swap them back and forth as you need. That's a touch on some of the major things we've been doing in geometry, but Joe's going to get into these and a lot more tips and tricks on Wednesday. So if you're in the geometry space, I'd encourage you to come back and spend an hour with Joe on Wednesday. I'm sure it will be very informing and entertaining session. Now, some of the other things we've been working on around geometry, there's still more here. We've introduced another new tool called multiple profile. Now, this is a tech preview tool. I will warn you of that. I think we've got a lot done here, but there's more work to do in this space. But what this tool allows us to do is look at multiple profiles in a single view. So I'm going to first start by picking my control profile. That's the one my stationing or my chainage is based on. And then I can put other profiles into the view. I can easily override their symbology so I can see them different, make it easy to look at in here, because it may get confusing if they're all using the same symbology. And I can even turn on what we call a zone. See this kind of purple line I've got displayed in here? That's the zone of this bridge, so I can see where that's at in my model easily. It's got a new tracking and analysis capability into here, so as I browse around in there, I can see tracking across all of these profiles at once. In this case, I've got 3 profiles in there. I can turn on and off any of these columns of information that I want to see, and I can even have them highlight and tell me if it exceeds some criteria I established. For example, if I want to know if the delta vertical offset is greater than 150 millimeters, I could turn that on. And when it does show up as greater than that, it'll be red in the dialog. We've built in a synchronization capability here. So as you pan around in the profile, you can have it panning and zooming in your plan view as well. There's also a synchronization to your dynamic cross-section. There's another type of filtering you can build in where instead of putting it in the table, it'll actually annotate that filtering down in the profile view itself. And there's an ability to turn on an interval. So it will measure not just at the key points along here, but at whatever interval you specify through these tools. Another piece that we've added in geometry is a new deed boundary tool. So what this tool allows us to do is create geometry boundaries or closed geometry sections using one of three methods. We can do it by shapes. In this case, I'm going to go select an existing shape that's closed. Well, you say, well, if it's already a shape, what's the difference? Well, part of what we're storing with this is it does store and understand a point of beginning as well as a direction. It can also store with it a commencing line. So you can describe that parcel, how it's commencing from your known point over to that parcel location. The second way that we can build these is from independent graphics. So here I'm selecting 4 individual lines and letting it find where those intersection points are and build that parcel out of that, or that boundary area out of that. And then the third area that we could do this is by doing a fill area out of it. So if we go run it one more time, we'll use our boundary method as fill. We can then just click inside an area and it's going to create that geometry element out of those. Again, we'll specify our point of beginning, the direction that we want that to go in, and we've now created that parcel element. Now these parcels that we're creating, these are simply geometry elements, complex geometry elements. So they work just like any other geometry element. You can use them with annotations just like you would anything else. If you are interested in these kind of capabilities, please join Kevin Jackson on Wednesday, where he's going to get a lot more detailed into these parcels that I just showed you, and some things that we're doing with legal description writing. You'll see a little bit of preview of that here in a few minutes. With that, I'm going to give you a little bit of a break from myself and ask Jonathan to step in, and he's going to share with you some of the things going on with drainage.
Thank you, Dan. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So a few things that I'll share with you today. Pretty much all feedback that's come probably from the ideas portal that people have been filling in. So this first one is probably really to do with setting out information. So there was some feedback. People were saying, I can get the baseline, station and offset, so maybe a road center line, for example. I can get the station and offset from the location point of the node. That's the point that a node is rotated about. But in our cells for our nodes, you can also define a set out point. So it might be at the back of curb or something like that. And that's the information that you might need on site to actually stake out the location of a node, a catch basin, for example. And we didn't have a way of getting the station and offset to your road center line from that set out point. So we've added that in as well now. That will appear automatically in your civil properties. Because it's in the civil properties, it's available across a reference. So if you're referencing your drainage in and annotating it in a container file, that information will be there. So you can choose whether to annotate the baseline, station and offset from your location point or your set out point, or both if you wanted, but whichever one's the most applicable to you. You've now got both sets of values available. And then off the back of that, we've added the ability to get the baseline, station and offset for a conduit. Now we've kind of borrowed from the nodes here. So instead of asking you to pick a baseline reference, again, probably a road center line, for your conduit, we figured, well, if you want to use baseline, station and offset, you will have already picked it for the nodes. So if the nodes that the conduit links to have got a baseline reference set, then we use that automatically. So in this particular case, the picture on the bottom right, the two nodes are linked to two different baselines, a side road center line and a main road center line. So we handle that case as well, and we give you the station and the offset for both ends of the conduit. Now, normally those will be slightly different to the station and offset for the nodes because the conduits are trimmed to the connection regions. So therefore that baseline, station and offset will be just slightly different to the values for the nodes. Next slide, please, Dan. Thank you. So a little bit more actually on the civil properties on this slide, but possibly this one might even have wider implications. So we've added a bit more information into the civil property pane on the shape and dimensions of a conduit. So a circular conduit's got a diameter, you know, a box conduit's got a rise and a span, and a trapezoidal ditch section would have, you know, a bottom width and side slopes. So regardless of the shape of the conduit, the civil properties will now give you some relevant information on that. That might solve a few problems with annotation, where previously, particularly across references, people were using the feature description or creating an item type to access that physical information for the conduit. But what it also enables us to do, because this is now a value that's, or values that are in the civil properties, we can use functionality like microstation display rules. And again, this comes back to a couple of ideas that have been logged on the portal, where some people have said, I want to change the symbology of my conduits based on their size. Now that might be in plan, that might be in profile. We can handle those situations now, because you can set up display rules that say if the size of the conduit is between X and Y, then I want to use this symbology. If it's between Y and Z, I want to use a different symbology. And because it's done using display rules, you can toggle that symbology on and off very easily. So that's another enhancement, which I know that similar functionality used to be available in InRoad Storm and Sanitary. So that's now available in OpenRoads as well. Next slide, please. So multi-barrel conduits, as many of you may know, we added support in the physical model for multiple barrels. So if you had a culvert which was using a circular conduit or a box section conduit, the graphics correctly showed those shapes of conduit with multiple barrels. The missing shape that we hadn't until now added support for is ellipses. So now if you've got an ellipse shape culvert barrel and you toggle on multiple barrels and put in the number of barrels that you need, you will now see that correctly represented in the 3D model. So the hydraulic analysis was always correct. That wasn't a problem, but the physical representation wasn't. So we've added that functionality in now. Next slide, please. So this one's a bit more localized, perhaps. The Vivand format is something that's mandated if you're doing drainage design for the Danish Roads Authority. It's a deliverable format that's used in construction and then ultimately feeds into asset management software, you know, as constructed values. So there was no easy way to get drainage and utilities data from OpenRoads out into this particular format. So we've added the ability to do that. Now, more generally speaking, we've used some user data extensions to do some calculations to give us an automated pay item number. So for a certain size of conduit, you know, if it's a certain depth below the surface, then use its one pay item number. And as the depth increases by a certain band, then the pay item number will increase automatically as well. Now, that functionality is just using generic user data extension functionality. So it's been an interesting exercise to get that to work for the Vivand format, but it is something that could be done generally at the moment. It's not directly linked to this enhancement for Vivand. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this was a more minor change here. When you compute a scenario, the calculation summary tab that I'm showing in the screen capture here told you some hydraulic results like flow and velocity, depth in both ends of the conduits, things like that, but it didn't actually tell you the size of the conduit. So if you're computing a design scenario where the sizes of the conduits could change, you would then maybe need to go and run a flex table or look at your annotation or something like that, or several methods available in the software to look at conduit sizes and whether they've been changed as the result of a scenario. But we've now just added an extra column into the calculation summary tab to tell you the size of the conduit. Now we've purposely used the rise field there because the rise is common to all conduit shapes. So small enhancement there, but just gives you a bit more feedback or makes it easier to understand exactly what's gone on with a scenario compute, particularly if you've done a design. Okay, next slide. So another one that came in from the ideas portal, we support in the software a whole bunch of time of concentration methods. However, we've had feedback saying that the list doesn't include everything. And we thought, well, okay, how many more are there to go? And the more we thought about the missing calculation methods for time of concentration, the more we thought, do you know what we need is a generic time of concentration calculator here, some method by which somebody can put in their own formula for whatever state, authority, jurisdiction you're working to. So if you need a time of concentration calculation that the software doesn't support, you can just go and add it yourself. Now, this uses user data extensions as well. The screen capture here, I've just used izzards as an example. I was also using the curve-pitch method, which actually we do already support in the software for a couple of states. So I just was using curve-pitch as a test to make sure I got my formula correct, and then I've added in a second UDX calculation for the izzards method. So in the properties of a catchment, we've added a new TC input type, so you could always put in a type or you could pick one of our calculation methods. The new method that we've added is a user formula time of concentration, and then we look to see if you've got any user data extensions set up which return a result in time. Okay, so my particular izzards formula here is going to return a time in minutes, so it's listed as an available formula for me to pick, and then that time of concentration will be used for all of our hydraulic calculations. So that will mean that you can use any time of concentration formula that you may need to. So if we don't support it, you can add it yourself, and it's as flexible as you need it to be. You can read in variables for the rainfall intensity, all of that kind of thing. This one's somewhat similar. Again, it was all about catchment hydrology. So as well as defining, giving you the ability to do a user-defined time of concentration, there was also some feedback on the ideas portal saying, if I've got a catchment that I want to break up into multiple sub-areas, the dialogue used to let you type in a percentage, so you could do, I don't know, 50% pervious, 50% impervious, by way of a simple example. But if you didn't know the percentages, but you knew the areas, the dialogue didn't let you type in the areas and kind of back calculate the percentages. So you had to do that calculation yourself. So what we've done now is we still support typing in the area, the percentages, but if you actually click in one of the fields, you get a little browse button, and that will open that calculator dialog that you see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. This tells you the total area of the catchment, and you can put in whatever part area you like, and it will calculate the percentage. So you're achieving the same objective, but you get to choose whether you want to define the sub areas in percentage terms or area terms. And one nice little touch is if the sub areas that you've put in so far don't actually add up to 100%, or they don't add up to the total catchment area, whenever you define a new sub-catchment area, the dialog will always default to the remaining area. So you don't have to actually do that calculation. You don't have to think, oh, hang on a minute, the catchment area is this, and I've defined this sub area and that sub area, so what's left? The dialog will do that for you. So that makes it nice and easy. Okay, next slide, please. Just got a couple more to go on the drainage side here. So a little bit of explanation on this. This might be relevant to road, but it's certainly relevant to railway design as well. If you're designing, railway in cutting, you're going to be looking to put some kind of porous conduit, sometimes called a filter drain or a French drain, to accept the runoff from the cut slope, as well as the track surface, maybe the road surface. And if you're defining a filter drain, what we've done is we've added several methods to let you state the rate of infiltration. So you can say it's so many CFS per linear measure of pipe, or it's so much per area of the pipe, cross-sectional area of the pipe. So there's a few methods available for you there. So it's you don't have to do any manual calculations. You can just say, right, I know that it's going to be so much per linear measure of pipe, put those numbers in, and then that's in effect, that's another method, if you like, of adding flow into your system, but it's a method that's much more suitable for infiltration situations than trying to calculate a flow or whatever else you might have done previously. Now, that functionality has been available in our SewerCAD solver for a while, but we thought, well, actually, we need to make it available in the GVF Rational solver, or the StormCAD solver, if you like, as well, because, as I say, for road projects and rail projects, you want to be able to put in these infiltration rates in a more user-friendly kind of way. And then the final slide for me before we go on to other topics is shear stress. So in the US, shear stress is covered by the HEC 15 design standard. And you want to know what the shear stress is, because you want to look at the material that a channel's being built from, and whether or not that material is suitable to accommodate the shear stress or not. So, if you've got, you might have a situation where the shear stress is too high, so you might need to use some kind of geotextile membrane, or you might need to use gabions, or whatever it might be, so that you've got an appropriate channel designed to resist the force of the shear stress in the channel. So we now automatically calculate the maximum shear stress for a channel element. So we look at both ends of the conduit and look at the depths in both ends, and calculate the shear stress from the highest of those depths. And that's just another couple of properties that we display there. But now you've got access to those numbers, you can go and look at your table and say, well, actually, do you know what? I've got a shear stress of 0.22 in this particular case. So, maybe I need to move my channel lining up to, a gravel mulch or riprap or whatever it may be. So we're not automatically changing the lining for you, but at least we're giving you the numbers that you need to make an informed decision on what lining you need to use. Okay, that's it from me. I'll hand you back over to Dan.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Great updates on the drainage side of things. We do have some more to go through. We're not done yet. I got a bunch more stuff I want to show you. There is another poll out there. If you'd like to participate, you can start just letting us know some of the things that you're seeing today that you like. Vote on what you think you like the most out of it while we continue through the rest of the presentation here. So let's move on and continue and talk about drawing production. What have we been doing in that space? Well, we've enhanced a variety of different annotation fields or text fields for you to give you more flexibility in what you annotate. One of the first ones is around chord and arc defined arcs. So the existing text favorite is now enhanced, so it will pick up either the chord or the arc defined definitions. But if you want one of those specific definitions, you can go in and choose that and tell it, no, I always want to label arcs or I always want to label chord lengths. Or you can pick up the chord length itself. Another annotation update that we've made is a new text field that allows you to compute the elevation difference between a profile and a ground, a terrain model. So you see that in the top part here. I can pull the elevation from the profile. I could do that before, or I could pull it from the ground. We now have one that will compute that difference for you. On the bottom here is an example of the other new definition here, which will compute that elevation difference between a point elevation and a terrain model. The third one that we've done to enhance for you in here is how your hand of curve is displayed. It's always been displayed before as either CW or CCW, and you didn't have any flexibility. What we've done is we've changed that over and made that a text field. So now you can put in there plus, minus, right, left, CW, whatever you want, capitals, lowercase, you choose. You just put in the text and that's what it's going to get annotated as. If you use frame annotation, we've now given you the ability to choose where that title block is located. Before, you could only put the title on the left. Now you can choose to put the title on the left, the right, or both the left and the right at the same time. That saves you having to copy it for those of you who do need to have it on both sides for your standards. You just have to copy it manually. It was extra work you shouldn't have to do. Now I want to make sure I cover this one because there's been a lot of discussion around it and maybe some misunderstanding. We are giving you some new functionality with the place label tool by at the same time taking something away. So back in the early days of OpenRoads Designer, we took the MicroStation place label tool and we made a civil copy of it and we did an enhancement in it, which was the ability to place text favorites. That didn't really pan out to be very productive, and that kind of went away and turned into what eventually became our civil labeler, which has way more power in it. So the need to place text favorites directly from the civil labels has kind of gone away. Well, in the same time, MicroStation has been making updates to this tool, and you haven't had that newer capability inside OpenRoads Designer, some of the filtering capabilities and other things that have been added into here. So with the 24 release, what we're doing is we're going to go back to the standard MicroStation place label tool. That still supports cells, so if you've got cells out there and you're placing labels for those, no problem. That all still works. The only thing that goes away is that ability to place text favorites directly, which you can still do through the place text tool if you need to, and you get all the additional functionality that's built in and matching the current MicroStation platform place label tool. We've made a bunch of enhancements around sheets. And I want to talk first about cross-section sheets and the height of them. So what you've got going on here we got an example of a really tall fill. So if we go in and we cut some cross-sections to this, What we're going to show you is this new maximum height capability that we have in here. But before I get into that, let me just go back and cut a cross section through this at one station. And let's look at what we would get today. So we'll create this cross section. I'll give the model a name here that this does not use the max, so no max in this one. And let's see the result. So here's our cross section. It was too big to fit on the sheet. Now, of course, you could scale it down. You could play with some things like that if it worked. But if you needed this scale, you didn't really have a good option. So this is where this new maximum height setting comes into play. We first go delete that name boundary, and let's create a new one. So same process as before, but now I'm going to enable this max height. Now you can set those heights up to be built into your sheet seeds, or you can use the calculate button in here to calculate them on the fly, or you can override that and type it in. So I'm going to allow a maximum height of 80 for this particular sheet seed and the scales that I'm using. That's what I've calculated will fit on that sheet. So now if I go and I run the name boundary there, and we'll create the cross-section sheet out of that, what you'll see is that it's fit the PGL and the corridor into there, and it's cut off the bottom portion of the sheet. So it fits within that height of 80, which was what we allowed here as the maximum onto our sheet. The next one I want to talk about is another enhancement to cross-section name boundaries, and this is about where are the name boundaries created at. So you need to be able to build a list to say, I want cross-section name boundaries at these locations. The example we're going to show here is I want them at some boreholes. We do this by using the named groups tool. If you're not familiar with named groups, what it is an ability to basically define a name and put elements into it. However you get those elements in there is up to you. You can use other tools like our select by graphics to have a pre-stored query out there to say, hey, go find me all my boreholes. Those are now in a selection set. I can take that selection set and I can add it to my name group. You can come back later and you can add more elements to that. You can remove elements from it. So it's easy to manage being part of a named group. Now, what can you do with that once it's in there? So the thing you can do with them in a named group is when we go in to create our cross-section name boundaries, we now have a new functionality to use those name groups to define where the cross-sections will get created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go pick my name group. That can be in my local file, or it could be in any reference file. So I'll select that, and then I'm going to turn on the option to include the name group points only. Now when we process and we run our cross-sections, the locations of them are going to be at those 11 positions that we asked for. In this case, they were boreholes, but those could be strategic places on your project. They could be at drainage inlets you wanted, at driveways, whatever you want them to be, you can go put those elements into that name group list and have those cross-sections built on those. Now moving over to the profile side of things, you needed a better way to size profiles. Are they tall enough to fit in, and are they getting positioned properly to fit in all the data that I want? So here I'm going to go in and pick a drawing sheet for my profile. We'll start putting it on here, and you can see it's ignoring my boreholes that I have on here in this case. And I really want that profile shifted so that it would include those boreholes in that. Or maybe I wanted to include drainage structures in there, and I needed those profiles adjusted to fit that. We have a new option here called Use Projected Points. And you'll see in the description, this is not just about boreholes, but drainage nodes, crossing points, or boreholes that are found in that profile. And when that's enabled, notice as I start dragging that name boundary over it, it sees that object and says, I need to adjust myself and include this object into my profile name boundary as well. Now, earlier in the geometry section, I talked about right to left profile support in the dynamic space. Well, that's true, but you also need that for your sheet production. So we've included that as well. So here we've got both a horizontal and a profile that are oriented in the right to left or east to west kind of an orientation. Currently, that profile is displayed left to right. we saw that earlier. We can go and toggle that at any time. And again, I want to stress that you can toggle that back and forth anytime you want. It doesn't matter to you. It's very flexible in what you do. So now let's go in and start creating name boundaries. Nothing new here. We're going to create our plan name boundary. Because the stationing increases moving in a western direction, that's the way they're going to be laid out. Nothing new there. So we'll lay that out. Next, we'll go in and we'll lay out our name boundaries on profiles. Now still, there's nothing new here. Although you can toggle that profile to be oriented left to right or right to left, the name boundary does not care. You could have your profile laid out one direction and swap it. Those name boundaries are going to keep up with it. They're the same either way. So here we're laying out some profile name boundaries matching our sheets up above. So where's this new thing that I keep talking about? Well, that comes into play when you actually cut the sheets. So when you're actually laying out those boundaries onto sheets, now it matters. What order are those sheets in and how does the annotation get created? So you can turn on that right to left option and it will lay those sheets out oriented now right to left. And you will see all that orientation, particularly in the profile space, it's doing that. Now, really important part to this too is notice that the annotations are all correct. That is using our existing annotation definitions, the same ones we had in the 23 version. You do not need to set up new annotation definitions to take advantage of the right to left or left to right orientations. In both the profile and the cross-section space, we've also added the ability now for you to include hatching or cross-hatching or area patterning into your models. So here we've got both a sheet model of a cross-section as well as our dynamic section, and they did not have any hatching in them yet. The place that you attach that hatching is in your element templates. So we'll go in here to this element template, and we're going to turn on some hatching for that. So we'll go under and then attach. We'll do some area patterning for this first one for our base course. So we'll use a rock area pattern here and give that an appropriate scaling so it looks decent on my model. You can define whatever spacing and angles that you want for that as well to make your patterning look the way you want it to look. I'll turn off annotation. No, we don't need to annotate this patterning. And now let's go define another one for our intermediate base course as well. So we'll select that. Let's just put some basic hatching onto this one and define those settings. Now, this is not new. You could put these settings on your element templates before. You may even have them there already in the hopes that it would work. The problem was it just didn't pick them up and work before. Now it does. The only thing you need to do to make it work is you do need to reprocess the corridor so it sees those new element template definitions and they're there. Once you reprocess that, I can open up my dynamic cross-section or open up my sheet cross-section or my profile, and those patterns will be shown in there. So no changes to your feature symbologies or anything, just add them to your element templates, reprocess your corridors, and you will have that. Next, let's move on and talk about reports and what we've done in this space. So in the 23 release, we made quite a few updates to the station and offset reporting, consolidated a couple reports together. We've done a little bit more with it now in the 24 release of software. And the thing that we've done here is we've allowed you to now pick a corridor hull as that offset piece of geometry that you're computing your stations and offsets to. Why might that be important? Well, one place it really helps with is if you're trying to compute stations and offsets in an area of benching. And you've got multiple geometry or tie-down kind of points in there through that bench. This will find that outermost point in that hull and produce the station and offset report for you. It'll report on both sides of the roadway, both left and the right side. We've made an update to the horizontal reports, or horizontal point report. You can see on the upper right there that the points are structured in a little bit more of a logical order than they were in the last existing version of that report. So it was updated to help you a little bit there. Now, earlier I talked about the new tool to create boundary elements. The companion tool to that is the ability to write deeds based off of those elements that you've put into here. So here we're going to go into the deed writer, and we're going to be able to select statements out of here. Now these statements, like this disclaimer statement, is fully customizable. So you can build your own library of statements, and those statements have in them insert fields. So now as I move over to the location statement, you can see this one's got about 8 fields in there. If you look in the middle of the dialog, those fields are showing up where they're at in that statement. And as I populate them with resolved results, you see it updating into there. So again, that library of those statements, you can fill out yourself on the language that works for your needs, and choose which inserts that you want to put in there and which ones you want to just be static words. You can build up your legal description by including these phrases into that description, which you see at the bottom portion of the dialog. This is fully integrated with your geometry, so when you need to go in and describe like your commencing lines or the boundary lines and arcs, it's going to pull that information out of there automatically, your bearings, your distances, your radii, things like that, and build that into your legal description. Once you get the description the way you want it, you can save that out to a text file and use it wherever you need to. And just a quick reminder that Kevin will be covering all that again at the session on Wednesday. He'll be getting into a lot more detail. Next, let's move on and talk about geotechnical. So we have added a lot of functionality in the space of geotechnical here. Part of the reason for that is the GINT product that many of you may be using today is being deprecated here in a couple of years. The end of 26, I believe, is the current date for that. So what we've done is we've integrated in the open ground functionality into here. Now, when I say integrated, this is much more than we've ever had before with the GINT integration. What you'll see here is that we've got true integration. The boreholes that exist are actual objects in the OpenRoads, OpenRail, OpenBridge, and OpenTunnel products now. Across the civil platform, they understand this geotechnical information. They understand that a borehole is a borehole and what its properties are. That's fully integrated, as we've seen in some of the cross sections and profiles I just showed you, into that functionality. So those recognize those boreholes, they can annotate them using text favorites and place all of that data into the file. So let's take a little bit of a look at this. So here we brought some boreholes in. You will see in the OpenRoads standards in here that there are feature definitions for those geotechnical depths, the intervals, the location pieces in there. You will see the feature symbologies that are tied to those. Those in turn tie to element templates that define the individual data that you're going to put in there. So for example, for your substrata layers, how do you want to do the patterning for those? How are they going to look in there for your topsoil or your clay or your limestone layers? And that's the result that you would see then in a profile if you were looking at that on a borehole and you see it fully annotated. Now, these boreholes do have full, rich data brought in with them. So when they're brought in from the Open Ground software, they've got all of that attribution. You can get to that, whether you're in the 2D, 3D, or profile spaces, you can get at it both for the borehole and the individual strata that are defined within there. As I mentioned, it is integrated in with your text fields, so you can set up text favorites to label information coming from those boreholes, and then use the civil labeler to label that within your plans. If geotechnical is an interest of you, please join Marie-Claude and Derek tomorrow, where they're going to be going into a lot more detail on this geotechnical side of things. Just a couple more slides to wrap up, and we will get out of here for today. I know this presentation is on road, but I did want to mention on the rail side that there is a What's New for Rail coming up on Thursday. Kavanch and Hawken will be covering that. So if you're interested in things like heavy duty regression, full plan and horizontal and vertical regression, cants, turnouts, things like that. A whole bunch of enhancements and really nice stuff we've done on the rail side as well. Please come back and join us for that. And I did also want to mention that our SignCAD product has recently been released. So SignCAD was updated and released, the 24 release, back on August 9th, so it's been out a month now. The big important things that have been added to the SignCAD release is it is integrated now with ProjectWise. So you can store your SGN files in ProjectWise. It's got full integration to open and close and save those files. It's got integration now to export your EPS and plot files, including the contour cut functionality. The registration mark functionality from older versions of SignCAD has been restored into there. We've made some updates to the import to DGN functionality, letting you scale those as you're importing them, giving you a little bit more flexibility on how you control the decimal places on the dimensioning, and even a batch import piece of functionality. And there's also been a number of updates to the state standards where states have asked us to update some of their parts that are included in there. With that, I apologize for running a couple minutes over here, but it was great that you could all join us today. I do want to thank you for coming.